From Washington, D.C., you are listening to Rule of Law Albania with Albi Cela.
Hello everyone and welcome to the second episode of Rule of Law Albania. I'm your host, Albi Cela, and in this episode my guest is Anjest Agushi, a very dear friend and a colleague of mine. We both graduated from College University Better back in Tirana, Albania, and now we are residing in Washington, D.C. Today with Anjest, we want to share with you the best experience that we had during law school, and that is the Philip C. Jessup International Law Moot Court competition, also known as the Jessup. We will talk about our experience during the Jessup, how the Jessup shaped our career, what are the benefits of being part of this competition, and how the Jessup can help Albania foster a better legal education and enhance the rule of law in Albania in the future. Anjest, thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Alvin. Thanks for inviting me.
So before we jump in, I will just give a brief history of the Jessup. So the Jessup started in 1960, actually, with only 2 participating teams at the time. Today, Jessup has more than 750 law schools in more than 100 jurisdictions, making it the oldest and the world's largest moot court competition. So the competition is a simulation of a fictional dispute between countries before the International Court of Justice, which is the judicial organ of the United Nations. The Jessup is a demanding but very rewarding competition that offers an excellent opportunity for improving oral advocacy, writing, research, and collaboration skills, and for developing expertise on cutting-edge international legal issues. So with regard to the eligibility in participating in the Jessup, one team is allowed to participate from every eligible law school. Teams prepare oral and written pleadings arguing both the applicant and the respondent positions of the case, and most teams usually must first compete in national and regional competitions to earn the right to advance to the White & Case international rounds, which are held every spring in Washington, D.C. So pretty much this is the background of the Jessup. Anjest, can you give us a background on how did you get to know the Jessup?
Yes, so I got to know the Jessup because you got me involved through a message that you sent me in Facebook, and you made it look like it was the real deal before the International Court of Justice. And at the time I didn't know Jessup at all, but in the end I'm really glad that I got to participate.
Well, I'm glad that you accepted the offer to be in the Jessup team, Anjest. So Anjest got in the team back in 2017. However, the Jessup at Bader University was implemented starting from 2014. So in 2014, there were 2 professors at Bader University who established the team and did the Jessup for the first time for Bader, because actually Albania participated in the Jessup in early 2000s with the Tirana State University, but then there was a gap of more than 10 years actually. And then in 2015, I did the Jessup for the first time. And I did the Jessup for 3 other more times. So I did the Jessup in total 4 times until 2018. And actually I got to do the Jessup with Anjest 2 times in a row in 2017 and 2018. And that is where I got to know Anjest, and we became friends and co-agents during the Jessup. So Anjest, how was the selection process when you got in the Jessup?
So the selection process was a bit different in the 2 years that I got to be involved. So in 2017 it was fairly simple. We had to be very good at English and also have some knowledge in international law. Then in 2018 it improved a little bit. We got to have an exam before the compromise came out.
So that's pretty much it. But yeah, the criteria hasn't changed a lot throughout the years that the Jessup was present at Bader University. Of course, we can do better, and even other Albanian universities that will hopefully do the Jessup in the futures would be better if they implemented a better selection process. So Anjest, why don't we talk a little about the phases of doing the Jessup? So let's start with a phase before the compromise is released. What is that phase like?
So that's the phase where when we have to constitute the teams, unless the team is already pre-constituted before that. So what we do in that phase is usually prepare for the topics which the Jessup announces in the very final of the competition, and we got to have some general ideas, some general books that we have, and yeah, that's pretty much it before the compromise comes out in mid-September.
Yes, and what about the compromise, actually, or the statement of agreed facts? What is a compromise? Can you explain us?
So basically, the compromise in Jessup is this set of fictional, let's say it like this, facts which involve two main parties, the applicant and the respondent. The parties are, of course, states, and in the very end of the compromise, there are issues which we have to write and argue. There are in total 4 issues per side. The applicant and the respondent basically have to counter argue each other. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and I believe we can say that actually the compromise is like the Bible of every participant, right? You get to live with the compromise for like 7 months. You get to learn by heart every word in the compromise.
Exactly. This is what I was going to say, that you have to master the compromise really, really well.
And it's not easily, actually, because it's not like other moot court competitions, which have a 2 or 3 pager compromise. The Jessup actually has a 20-pager case. So it's a case that involves 20 pages of facts that you need to go through it, because it's really important. Every word written there is really important. And then it's the research phase. Actually, I believe that the research begins as soon as one Jessup edition ends. The moment that they announce the topics of the next year edition, every student that wants to do the Jessup, they start researching on those topics, right?
Yes, this is basically what I said, that it's all the general topics that they announce in the very end. We basically look at how the compromise might be written, or what issues can the compromise have when it's released. So yeah, the research starts as soon as it ends, basically.
Yes, and during that time that you do the research, you also have to start writing your oral written arguments, right?
Well, you have to first understand what you're going to write, because and that's like the most important thing that differs the teams from each other. You have to write the structure, first of all, of your memorial, and then get to write the details about your arguments, and as you know, the references and all the footnotes that we have to include.
Yes, and during the way, you know that we had also to change the written arguments, because at some point, you know that they released corrections and clarifications in which they changed completely. Let's say not completely, but they changed some points in order to balance the problem for both sides.
Yeah, minor issues which some students have doubts upon.
Yeah, so students get to contact ILSA, which is the International Law Students Association, which deals with the Jessup. They contact ILSA and they're like, look, in this paragraph of the compromise on the statement of agreed facts, we don't understand this point, so could you clarify it for us? So ILSA considers all these questions that students make, and then they provide this set of corrections and clarifications. So the oral arguments are usually submitted mid-January, and then you start, like, let's say, the hardest part, we can say, which is the oral practice. So you get to choose which of the arguments that you wrote down you will do in your oral practice, because as you know, there is limited time in your oral rounds, so you can't just put out there all the arguments that you have. How is this oral practice for you?
To me, that's it was the most stressful part, because at least in the beginning, I had no idea on how to plead before judges, so that was difficult for me. But in the end run, it's probably one of the experience that really impacted my formation and my knowledge in law as well. And it also was something totally different because, as you know, it's not that we get much experience from our universities in that regard. And also, of course, it improved my presentation of a case and performance. So yeah.
Yeah. But so with regard to the oral practice, you know that in the oral rounds, it's not always important to have the right argument, right?
Yep.
The judges consider many things that you need to prepare for. So besides having knowledge on the law, answering your questions properly, knowing the facts, the judges look also at the style, the poise, and the demeanor, right?
Yes.
And the way how you organize your arguments and how you manage your time.
I would, in this regard, I will, and you know this situation as well in the European friendlies, where one of the judges actually reminded one of the participants to fix their ties because it wasn't straight enough. So that's how into details the competition requires you to be involved. So it starts from your suit and it goes into how you stand in front of the tribunal, how you stand at your desk. And then, of course, it goes into your presentation, how you structure your arguments, how you answer their questions. So, yeah.
I mean, yes, of course. I mean, you are arguing in front of the International Court of Justice, which is the world court, most prestigious tribunal in the planet. So, of course, you have to be serious before those judges, right? I mean, you have to look perfect and everything. So, Anjest, what do you believe what were the difficulties in each of the phases of the preparation for the Jessup, starting immediately with the pre-compromise phase?
Well, the difficulty starts, I guess, from the resources. You know, it's very difficult to access the resources that we need before that phase because, as you know, we get to access those resources after the compromise comes out. And we have to find the books by ourselves. Sometimes we have to spend quite some money into buying the books. So that's the first main issue, I think. It's finding the resources and finding the appropriate funding to get them.
Yes, that is accurate, actually, because as you know, there is not such a culture of public international law or international law in general in Albania. You can't find books, etc. So for years we had to deal finding resources only through Google or Google Scholar. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that is a very difficult part. But then it gets easier because for every student that participates in the Jessup, ILSA provides access to sources like Hain Online, for example, or Oxford Press. So which is a good thing during the competition. What about the writing of the memorial? Did you find it difficult?
In the beginning, of course, because as I said before, we aren't really used to these methods of legal writing that they require. I didn't know anything about IRAC. I didn't know anything about CRAC. So, which are, by the way, methods of legal writing that are used in these memorials, but everywhere else. And so I had to look for examples. I had to look into previous memorials and how they were written in order to understand how to structure it. Then in the second year, I guess that it became easier, of course, with experience. So I guess these were my main difficulties. And of course, adopting my research into my legal writing, also that was quite a challenge.
Yes, that is quite a challenge, actually. Yeah, and yes, the memorials actually are really important. So you should give a lot of effort in doing your best in the memorials, because that is what the judges actually initially see on the arguments that you will that you have prepared for the oral rounds. But in the memorials is not only important like the arguments itself; it's also how the memorial looks, right? The memorial should look actually really good.
Yeah, and it starts with a simple table of contents, which might look as easy, but it's really not, because that's
and before going to the table of contents, it's like the first page of the memorial in which everything should be in its place, right? Because, for example, if the team number is not in the correct place, or if it's the applicant or the or the respondent memorial, you can get penalties actually. So these elements are really important. Like everything should be in its place. So what comes after the memorials? We said that it's the oral practices. I found the oral practices really challenging for myself, and I feel like we didn't practice as much as we should have. We should have done more oral practices. And for those who want to do the Jessup in the future, we recommend you to do as many oral practices as possible. I mean, you should get to learn those arguments. You should get to work on the way you present those arguments, right?
Well, yes, it was challenging, but in the first year we didn't really have someone to direct us into oral practices. We didn't have someone to guide us. You know really well that most of the oral practices we did them by ourselves. So I think that's the one issue.
The toughest part, yeah.
Yeah. Having someone to guide you through this whole thing. And then, of course, it comes with other challenges, such as finding the right time. And of course, as students, when we don't have the necessary time to devote to this, while having other other assignments to do or whatever, it's also really difficult to find that space to practice.
Yes, and this is a very important point. Like for those Albanian law students that hopefully will do the Jessup, you should reach a point in which you can balance your law school life and the Jessup. You need to find time for both of them, because the Jessup requires a lot of commitment. So, for example, if a native English speaker would need 3 hours of research, or it needs one time to understand the case, you will need 6 hours, or to read that case at least 2 times in order for you to get it. Or in the oral practice rounds, if a native speaker needs 2 oral practice rounds per day, you need 4 or 5 in order to ameliorate yourself.
Yes, but also the professors in the universities should be really flexible to allow the students to practice, because you know really well that some professors do not really care about that, and they just want you to focus in their class. And so beside the students, also the university should allow some.
Of course, I mean, the university should help actually the students.
Yes.
With regard to this. So after the oral practices, then comes the fun part. It's the oral rounds, like the real oral rounds before judges and practitioners of international law. And it all starts with the European friendlies. It started with the European friendlies for us. So just for those who don't know, a Jessup team, a university, before making to the international rounds, firstly need to go through the national rounds, if there are actually national rounds in the state. And for example, in states like Russia, China, the US, it's dozens of teams that try to get in the Jessup, but it's only a bunch of them that make it to the international rounds. But with regard to Albania, it was only us for the last 6 years. So there was no other Albanian university that wanted to do the Jessup. So we didn't have national rounds, so we didn't get to practice before the international rounds. But we got to do the European friendlies. So what was the experience in the European friendlies for you?
I think, but I'm pretty sure that was the most important experience for me. I guess, in a way, even in the first year at least, even more important than the actual competition, the international rounds, because it taught me all the things I needed to know before the international rounds. And the professors there who judge you are really open to teach you how to plead before a court, or even how to dress. And I guess that we also were lucky to have the right professors to judge us. So yeah, it was really, really important for me.
Well, I can tell the difference of not having the option to go at the friendlies and going, because back in 2015, when I did the Jessup for the first time, we couldn't afford to go at the European friendlies because we didn't have the funds. But then in 2016, 17, and 18, we got to do the friendlies, and it helped us a lot. It helped us ameliorate our arguments, our poise, our demeanor, everything. And we actually did better in the international rounds, especially in 2018. You were there, so you know about it. So after the European friendlies, we made it to the international rounds. We faced a lot of obstacles, mainly funding issues, but still we managed to make it to the international rounds. So talk to us a little about the international rounds.
Well, for me, it's like something which put me out of my shell, let's say it like this.
Out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, comfort zone. When since the very first moment when you get into that hotel where the competition is held, you get to see all of these hundreds of students from hundreds of universities.
Let's say, what was the best? Because the best moment for me that I will never forget in my life in 2015 was the moment that I entered like the opening ceremony. There is this huge room with at least 1,000 students from all over the world, practitioners, etc. With those 100 flags. That was the best part for me. What was the best part for you?
So the best part for me was definitely seeing all of the same people which share the same passion, and to see everyone dedicate their time to the memorials, and also that part when you get the memorials and you get to see the other team's memorial, where you start working, you actually start working in the competition, you actually get truly involved in the competition. So that's like the best part for me.
Well, you know what is beautiful about the Jessup that you get to see there is the fact that, I don't know if you noticed, but there are teams whose governments in the real life, they don't get along with each other.
Exactly.
Like India and Pakistan, for example. But you have teams of India and Pakistan in the Jessup that stick together, like party together, feast together, and that is another beautiful part of the Jessup. Right?
And even the fact that these teams from these countries which are not as wealthy, they find the funds to and the time to dedicate themselves to Jessup it's really impressive to me.
Well, of course. For example, you can take as an example Palestine, like a country that suffers a lot, and still they make it to the Jessup every year, which is a good thing for those students and for Palestine itself, right?
Yep.
So Anjest, compared to the European friendlies, how were the international rounds, like the rounds in itself? Did they differ, the judges, the difficulty of the round?
Of course. First of all, you have to sort of adopt a different standing, which means that you are not as free to do mistakes anymore. You are not as flexible as you are in the European friendly. In the international rounds, the judges start evaluating everything that you do and will lower your points, basically. And of course, in here there are practitioners which have years of experience in the international law field, and the evaluation in the international rounds actually matters, because in the European friendlies is sort of a feedback, not really an evaluation. It's maybe more of a guidance as to how you should approach things, while international rounds, it's of course it's in a more fixed evaluation that actually determines your position.
I totally agree with you in that point. I mean, the international rounds of the Jessup are the real deal. I mean, you get to meet these amazing experts and practitioners of international law, like even real judges
or ex-judges.
Or ex-judges, actually. So Anjest, last year for me was also a new experience because I coached a team for the Jessup. It wasn't the same experience as participating, of course. And this year, both of us, we're judges in the Jessup. How was this experience for you?
So this year I got to judge the Northeast regional national rounds, and I also was set to judge the international rounds, which unfortunately got cancelled. So this experience for me was really different. It was really different to sit on the other side of the bench. I sort of wanted to go back again into being a counsel rather than a judge, because at least to me it wasn't as satisfying as being a counsel, but it also made me realize some of the behind the scenes stuff that judges do and that we didn't really understand as a student. And of course it teaches you some other things. It teaches you how to evaluate the students. So all in all, I think it was an eye-opening experience.
Exactly. I mean, I could say the same thing for me. The judging experience was really great. I mean, you get to meet also these amazing practitioners, other practitioners from all over the world. But I'm like you, I judged the Midwest rounds, and they were great round. I had a lot of fun there judging. But of course, I wanted to be on the other side of the room, to be honest. I wanted to be, again, a counsel at the end of the day. So, Anjest, let's talk a bit about the benefits of the Jessup. What did you benefit from the Jessup? How did it influence you?
Well, basically, Jessup influenced a lot of things. Where I am now, I think it's because of Jessup, and I'm currently an LLM student at Georgetown University, which I saw for the first time during Jessup. Because of Jessup, also, I got the passion to study for international law, which is what I study now. And it's also my aim for the future as well. So it basically decided my whole career.
Well, pretty much it's the same for me. I mean, I remember the first time I came here in Washington, D.C., when I first did the Jessup. I promised myself that I want to study here in D.C., and I want to continue contributing in the Jessup, either by coaching or either by judging. And I did both of them. So maybe, who knows, one day, me and you, we can be again co-agents in a real life case. So we don't know about that yet. Well, now let's talk a bit about the difficulties that a Jessup team from Albania may face during the way. What do you think is the most difficult thing that they can face, and that we did actually face?
The most difficult thing? Well, I would start from funding, which eventually becomes easy, as you said, but in the beginning, for some students, that might be really determining their whole desire for Jessup, I would say. Then it goes from the preparation, and I'd say even in the international rounds as well, because you know that we don't experience those kind of competitions too much, so we may feel out of the box somehow. Yeah, I would say these are the most difficult things.
Well, yes, the points that you made are completely true. However, I would say that a thing that many students would face is also the willingness of the universities to do these kind of competitions. We experience the same thing, but we have to admit that Peter did a lot for us, especially.
Yeah, like you said, it's we the first, let's say, struggle for us is to try to
Forming a team, like try to
forming
build
a team, and
that,
even convince the university that we are ready, for the next year, and we have to participate next year as well. But yeah, as you said, in the end, it's worth it.
Yes, exactly. So before we come to an end of this episode, why don't we provide some advice for future Albanian law students that want to do the Jessup? So what would you advise them?
I would first advise them to change their working mentality. It's got to be much different, and they have to work more than they have ever worked in their student years, because you have to dedicate a lot of your time to this. The other thing is to adopt a teamwork mentality, because Albanian students, but I guess most civil law students in general, lack this teamwork mentality, because we are very individualistic, and teamwork in Jessup is the basically how you approach the whole competition. You can't do it by yourself. You can't do the memorial by yourself. You can't do the oral practice by yourself. So it's really important. And
it's a teamwork after all. I mean,
a team
you
effort,
just imagine the amount of work that you have to put in the memorials in the beginning. You know that both memorials, applicant and respondent, they are more than 100 pages both, which is a lot of research. Yeah. I mean, it requires a lot of research, a lot of commitment. So you need to share the responsibilities throughout the team members.
Yeah, and I will also advise the students to continuously put pressure to your universities
and to each other.
And just do your best. I'd say do everything that you can to.
Well, yes, and also as we said previously to each other, it's like the important thing is not about bringing the Jessup Cup back home.
Mm-hmm.
It will take years for Albania to reach that point. The important thing at this point is to get to do the Jessup and get the best experience out of it, and also help future generations in Albania to do the Jessup or other international moot court competitions.
Yeah, if you learn a lot of things during Jessup, if you learn things that you haven't learned before, or you haven't even experienced before, I'd say that that's a win.
I guess it's just what the Jessup imposes you to do. It's like the amount of work that you have to do. It makes other things look easier. At least this was my experience. Like law school seemed easier for me compared to the amount of work that I put in for the Jessup. I don't know if the same happened to you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even now, it definitely made things easier, especially for stuffs like legal writing or oral advocacy. Even in this stage where we are right now, it definitely eased up a lot of.
And even the amount of reading. I mean, you know that a decision of a court of let's say the constitutional court in Albania, they are not so long. But in the Jessup, we had to read like cases that went up to 400 pages long.
Yep.
For example, is a Nicaragua case. It's the entirety of the case is like more than 400 pages.
And not just
a lot of reading.
Not just the case, even books which are, I don't know, 500, 700 pages long.
Yeah, you have the book of international law, Malcolm. It's up to 2,000 pages nearly. So it's a lot to take in. So just to bring this to an end, I want you guys that you will listen to this podcast, to those all those Albanian law students that wants to do the Jessup. You can contact me and Anjest. I will provide both our emails at the description of this episode, and we can help you get in touch with the right people in order to make this come true, like your participation in the Jessup. I will also provide the website of the International Law Students Association, which is the NGO that deals with the Jessup. And if you go through the website of ILSA, which is ilsa.org, you can find a lot of information that will be useful for you. You will find the rules of the Jessup. on how to settle a team and what do you need to know before doing the Jessup, you can find a lot of materials which can help you. For example, you have a guide about the Jessup. It's a how-to manual for the Jessup competition, and it contains information on working with the compromise, researching international law, on how to write the memorial, on devising oral pleadings, and using skills learned from the Jessup in your legal career, actually. So this is a big deal, guys. So I hope you will enjoy this podcast, and we welcome every question that you might have. Anjest, thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you, Olby, once again for inviting me. And just like you said, we are very open for the students to contact us. We can provide a lot of information. And also, the last thing I would tell to everyone who wants to participate in Jessup is to never be discouraged and never stop, let's say, learning and participating despite what they might think it's not fair before and during the competition as well.
Exactly. And during these difficult times, remember to stay healthy and stay safe.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Anjest. Bye.
Thank you.